Greetings everybody, welcome to G4G on YouTube. I am your host, as always, and as expected, Napalm Dawn. Today we are returning to the series that I was working on before Alpha 3, which is comparing the characters from Marvel Avengers Alliance to their iterations in other Marvel games. And we're going to resume with the infiltrators, so we're almost done with this list. We're going to try to keep this short, which means I may get to the generalists, I may not. Generalists are very small. I'm going to try to wrap them in with the infiltrator video. So, we will use the Marvel Avengers Alliance Wiki and Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux to discuss this video. We'll be comparing characters in Marvel Avengers Alliance to Marvel Strike Force, Marvel Future Fight, and that's pretty much the main ones. A little bit Marvel Battle Lines and Marvel Heroes. Not really Contest of Champions. If I could remember Marvel Avengers Alliance Tactics and Marvel Avengers Alliance 2, I would. But frankly, I just really can't. So, before we get into the meat of the video, the background soundtrack today is the original Destiny soundtrack. And I have to state things over and over and over and over and over again till people get it. This video is not about Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux. Yes, it is up on the screen, and this is what Alpha 3 looks like now, but if you want to discuss Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux, you want to ask questions about it, you want to make statements or whatever, go to a Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux video. Do not talk about plans for mobile versions or characters or ask for updates. Go to an MAAR video. That is not what is to be discussed here. The only thing that should be discussed in the description down below, in the comments and everything, is the actual content of this video, whether you agree or disagree with my rankings. Don't ask about MAAR stuff, and in all honesty, frankly, I'm getting tired of translating half my comments, so how about you translate your question, and then I'll answer, and you do the translation, because it's getting really old having to translate 50% of what I've got. So, let's begin. As I said, we're starting with the infiltrators today. So the first one is A-Bomb, which is not to be confused with Abomination, which is of course a Hulk villain. A-Bomb was a semi-late game infiltrator. As you can see, he popped up in 2014, but then was available later for gold for a period of time in 2016. As kind of fun as he was for a relatively hardy infiltrator, which was tough to do, he has not shown up in any other game, so we really can't compare him. Agent Venom. If you go back to my Bruiser video, I basically wrapped all the Venom discussions into the Bruiser video where we encountered Anti-Venom. So I'm going to stick with that. However, I will say that Agent Venom is in Marvel Avengers Alliance and is in Marvel Future Fight. He is okay in Future Fight. He is not in Marvel Strike Force, although there is a regular Venom over there. He was pretty decent in Marvel Future Fight, and there is now an Agent Anti-Venom in Future Fight, which is even a little bit better. The issue is he's not super strong anywhere that he goes, and of course the biggest thing is when he went out of control, he switched over to the Bruiser form. He did it randomly. You had to pick something that wasn't the actual target in order for him to target it, and when you had three characters on the screen, if you pick the center one, he may hit the top, he may hit the bottom. Even if you wanted to hit the top one, it wasn't a guarantee. So if they could have made him better if they upped his infiltrator damage. They made you allowed to switch to the out of control mode, and maybe they gave you an ISO that allowed you to control the out of control mode. Make him target what you want. There's several ISOs that could have fixed him and made him better. I would have to say his power level was probably biggest in Marvel Avengers Alliance, but he is pretty good at Marvel Future Fight, and when you put him on a symbiote team of Anti-Venom and Carnage or Spider-Man and everything, he does okay. He's not meta, but he is pretty resistant. He is pretty hardy, but I still have to give it to Avengers Alliance. He was just a waste. It was really sad. My girlfriend and I were long distance at the time. When I was telling her about the season in which Agent Venom was the reward, she's like, oh, do really well this season. You got to get Agent Venom. He's Haas. H-O-S-S for those not familiar with the term, and he just didn't wind up being Haas by any stretch. So I think I want to lower this just a tiny bit. No, not 0. Okay, 5 should be good. So up next is AntMan. So this iteration of AntMan is in Marvel Strike Force, is in Marvel Future Fight, was a costume in Marvel Heroes. So this one is generally represented as movie AntMan or Scott Lang. He was pretty good in Marvel Avengers Alliance as an infiltrator, especially if paired up with the Ant set that the agent had and everything. He was really good on debuffs, which is what infiltrators do, but of course he wasn't gonna like outright kill somebody. He eventually would get ISOs that made him good, and I personally thought the original AntMan, the Pym AntMan, was better because the debuffs to me just worked a bit better. They were more useful if you ran Hank and Hank with Pym and Beast together. It was really good. I thought AntMan was okay. He was meta in Marvel Future Fight during a period of time. He was considered the speed meta because he was very resistant when he would shrink down. He had a very, very high dodge rate. Those days are long gone. He's not really anywhere in Future Fight right now. He's okay on Strike Force. He has some interesting debuffs there in Strike Force. I would have to say he was at his best in Marvel Avengers Alliance, but amongst all 3 games, he was fairly close. I would have to say that Future Fight is right now the lowest for him because he's fallen out of his meta, and he does solid work in Strike Force, especially if you had like Vision and Scarlet Witch. But I gotta give it to Marvel Avengers Alliance. Beetle has not really occurred anywhere other than Marvel Avengers Alliance. She's not really playable in any other games, although this outfit actually looks very similar to, I believe it's Janet Van Dyne's character in Marvel Future Fight, which slightly resembles the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie costume. Obviously, you know, this is Janice Lincoln, which was the daughter of Tombstone. There is no relation, but there are definitely some similar costume elements to how Wasp looks in the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. She has no comparisons. Black Cat was one of those characters who was kind of solid for a newbie. She was an interesting scrapper. She also made a relatively decent infiltrator. She was a good person for early bleeds, if that's the way you wanted to go. And, you know, bleeds weren't anything to shake too much of a stick at in Marvel Avengers Alliance. They were very strong. And, of course, when you paired up Stroke of Luck into Nerve Chop, there was a ton of damage. There was a brief period of time when Night America came out that you could do Stroke of Luck over and over and over and over ad infinitum, that made your Nerve Chop probably be the single highest one-shot damage in the entire game. It was brief. If you didn't have Night America or you didn't get a chance to take a look at it when it was live, you missed out on something ridiculously fun. Her Claws outfit was pretty good. It did a few things, mostly catty, in that you got 3 stacks of bleeding, which was the maximum instead of 1. That really upped her benefit. She had low attack, but it was easy to build. Very good on accuracy and evasion. which means if you're doing the PKB method, you tried to give her health, you ignored stamina, so you went health, attack, and you basically didn't touch the rest. So you could actually go straight attack over here if you were doing the PKB method for ISOing your toons. People have commented that it led to glass cannons, but sometimes glass cannons is what you need. Marvel Avengers Alliance is where she does her best work. She is not in Marvel Strike Force, but she is in Marvel Future Fight, literally nowhere. Nobody talks about her in Marvel Future Fight. Up next, Black Widow. Much like all of the Avengers, Black Widow appears in just about every single game you can find in the Marvel Universe. She had a ton of outfits in Marvel Heroes, including a Fear Itself outfit, and she is considered very, very good in Marvel Strike Force, and was decent in Marvel Future Fight as a speed meta way back when. I think she was the original speed queen before AntMan took over, and then I think it went to Silk or Kate Bishop, and then it went to Elsa, Kid Kaiju. So she's been powerful in several different areas. She has considered the highest crit multiplier in Marvel Avengers Alliance history on Flying Kick. This converted your crit power into the most damage out of the entire game. Gray Suit gave her a really, really interesting thing in which if she was a tactician, she acted like an infiltrator, and if she was an infiltrator, she acted like a tactician. The Avengers suit saw some popularity, but it wasn't really that good unless you ran with other Avengers allies, and Age of Ultron wasn't too much different from straight up Avengers. The picking up was good if you built their crit really well because you countered with Flying Kick, and you had In the Shadows, which made the rest of Age of the Ultron Avengers stealthy. I have to say, her gray suit was probably her strongest overall, and considering all the games she's been in, I'm actually going to give her strongest PowerPoint right now to Marvel Strike Force. Black Widow is not farmable in Marvel Strike Force, which increases her rarity value, and she is absolutely deadly, and she tends to speed up the team. So she's very, very important to have a good Black Widow in Marvel Strike Force. She has not lost her power position, so I'm going to give it to Marvel Strike Force. Cloak and Dagger. What can you say about these guys? People hated Cloak and Dagger. I didn't. I very much jumped into the Cloak and Dagger meta. I used them in both games. Both offense and defense. And I found ways of dealing with enemy Cloak and Daggers. I constantly get into squabbles to a certain degree with people who say, oh, well, you should have needed to dedicate a team to fix Cloak and Dagger. I'm like, well, bullshit. That's what PvP was. PvP always had a major character that you spent a lot of your team's power on defeating. It was Pesty, it was Quicksilver, it was the Worthy, it was Cloak and Dagger, it was Fiza. If I had to build a team around generally beating Cloak and Dagger, I don't see the problem with it, because that's what meta means. They were ridiculous. There are people for calling for them to be depowered a little bit or nerfed when Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux comes out. I'm more of a purist and believe that Cloak and Dagger should not be nerfed, but some of the other nerfs that happened should be reverted, like the Heroic Age Iron Fist one. And we've talked about him back in the Scrapper video. Cloak and Dagger is in Marvel Battle Lines, and she's a very good low-cost card there, but hands down, Cloak and Dagger was at their strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Will we see them in other games? I don't know. The show on Hulu is very good. I would recommend it, but I don't really know how popular they will be. Electra is in a few games. Electra is in Marvel Strike Force, Future Fight, and was in Avengers Alliance. She really could have used a costume in Marvel Avengers Alliance, maybe like a hand costume or something like that. She never got it. She was really good in the fact that she caused internal bleeding, which was very rare at the beginning of the game. It is a form of bleeding that is not removable, and actually a well-kitted out Electra infiltrator on defense, especially with other bleeders, was really very scary, and I fell victim to good Electras back in the early days. She's newbie friendly in Marvel Strike Force. She's nowhere in Future Fight. I'm going to have to give it to Marvel Avengers Alliance for where she was at her best. Enchantress is currently in Marvel Future Fight, was in Marvel Avengers Alliance, and a different Enchantress, the DC one, is in DC Legends. But we're not going to talk about that because we're talking about the Marvel one. Enchantress threw the meta into chaos for a long time with Pesty. When Pesty and Chanty, the Pesty-Chanty connection, began to falter a little bit, that's when Playdom released the pre-firing infiltrator ISO that was used very effectively in Infiltrator Emma Frost, but it was also still very good on Enchantress. She was a beast when paired with Beast, no pun intended. It was the long game. Enchantress wouldn't blast you off the planet, she played the long game with the Scroll of Runemeroth and with Pesty. I'm going to have to say that even though she is good in Marvel Future Fight, and she does some things that not a lot of the other characters do, like she can debuff big bosses properly, and she's very strong in Marvel Future Fight, she was at her strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance, where she pretty much cruised as meta from when she came about to the end of the game, although she did fall off a little bit. Falcon was kind of an annoying piece of shit in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Not the worst infiltrator in the world, but he had his moments where going up against an enemy Falcon, yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon. If you know what that is, I'll give you some bonus points. She was not the worst infiltrator in the world. He was not the worst, and he was not the strongest either. He just, thanks to his friggin' passives of survival training, made battles very, very, very long. And if he was paired up with a good tank, he was obnoxious as shit. You tried to take him out so that you didn't have to deal with survival training, but he was tough to damage as he was very evasive. He is in Marvel Battle Lines. He is in Marvel Future Fight. And he was in Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. His Spec Ops in Marvel Avengers Alliance 2 to get him was very, very tough. And it was very early on. If they had released it several months later, it might have been easier. I will say, I do remember that about Marvel Avengers Alliance. He is somewhat okay for speed meta in Marvel Future Fight, but he's more of a supporting character. I have to give his strongest appearance to be Marvel Avengers Alliance. Fandral is a Warrior 3. He is in Marvel Future Fight and Marvel Avengers Alliance, but that's all he's ever really been. He was ridiculous with other Warriors 3 at the time. He and Volstagg were really a tough pair to overcome because Volstagg liked to do slashing attacks and Fandral liked to use bleeds. Volstagg would sit there and go ahead and protect Fandral long enough for him to get bleeds out. There we are. And what was very interesting is that the moment you would clean up your bleeds, he would come by and drop the Flinting Circus, and then all stacks of bleeds would show back up again. In case you don't remember, it was 3 stacks of bleeding. You also had his Elixir move, which when paired up with the agent using the Warriors 3 cup, whose name, not the Chalice, what was that? Tankard. Yes, the Tankard. If you used the Warriors 3 Tankard with Volstagg and Fandral, they were really, really obnoxious. He was also very tough with Pesty because of the AoE 3 stacks of bleeds. he is nowhere in Marvel Future Fight. He's not any meta whatsoever, so strongest was Marvel Avengers Alliance. Gambit is one of the mutants that people always say, this is what I want in a game. I want Gambit, I want Gambit, I want this Gambit, I want Gambit the movie, Gambit, Gambino. Everybody wants Gambit to show up in a game. It's rumored he may show up in Marvel Strike Force later in the year as they tackle mutants again. And he is in Marvel Avengers Alliance, but he's not really anywhere. People thought he would be meta, but nobody's talking about Gambit anymore. I will have to say his strongest was in Marvel Avengers Alliance, especially with the ISO that causing the flank off of the high card augmented was really good, and then his pilfered ISO made him an actual, like, exploitative boss killer. You just kept stacking the Ace of Spades on people, and then you just busted them open, similar to the Black Cat thing. Marvel Avengers Alliance did get that fixed by Playdom at some point, and Gambit was essentially then nerfed into obscurity, but for a large period of time, Gambit was that hidden little gem that people used and wouldn't really tell you about because they were afraid that Playdom would fix it, which they did. Invisible Woman is in Future Fight now and may eventually appear at Strike Force, sort of. She is decent in Future Fight, but nobody really talks about her. And as an infiltrator with the air pressure ISO, which is this circulating one, she was kind of ridiculous in Marvel Avengers Alliance. She was often paired up with Molly to protect Molly with air pressure long enough for Molly to go into her tantrum. She was used somewhat effectively with other people, but it was very definitely Invisible Woman, air pressure, and Molly that was a scourge of PvP for some time. The inability to get debuffs to stick meant Molly would not get exhausted, and it would mean she would go into her full tantrum. Kitty Pryde was in Marvel Heroes. I really liked her in Marvel Heroes, but that's about the only game she's ever been in aside from Marvel Avengers Alliance. She was very fun in Marvel Heroes, but for Invisible Woman, Kitty Pryde, I have to give her strong points to Avengers Alliance. Medusa is considered a very good buffer for Marvel Future Fight, as she buffs physical damage very well for the Universal characters. She pairs up well with Black Bolt. In Marvel Avengers Alliance, she was okay. She had some very, very interesting abilities. Most of it had to do with her hair-related abilities, like this tied up, where Medusa tanks. It's always awkward when an infiltrator tanks, and no offense not to be sexist, but it's always awkward when an infiltrator female tanks in Marvel Avengers Alliance. It's hard to wrap that around your brain, that, like, I'm going to set up an infiltrator to tank. So that often caused confusion as to who could use Medusa effectively. Despite her appearance in Marvel Future Fight, I will have to say that her strongest was Marvel Avengers Alliance, just simply by default. Her and Black Bolt actually gave a really, really high point value team up. It was one of the ways to get one of the highest team ups in the game, if I remember correctly. So keep that in mind. Moondragon came out late in the game. I used to call her Vija. So there was a Star Wars, the movie, I think it was the very, very original one, where they come across some alien life form who's this bald chick, and she keeps saying Vija, which is actually the call signs of a satellite that got lost out there. So I used to affectionately call Moondragon Vija. She was very, very big on the psychic attacks. She's not really appeared in any games yet, so we can't compare her. So that means she wins in terms of Marvel Future Fight. Moving on, and we're going to try to speed this up because it is running a little long here. Morbius has only appeared in Marvel Avengers Alliance. He was more fun than you gave him credit for. He teamed up very, very well with Blade, and he actually teamed up with other gear and characters who liked mental debuffs, like Mind Control, Disoriented, Possessed, or Bleeds. I did a video later in the game called Team Craven Blood, which was Craven and Morbius, and it made use of the buff ISO that you could put in the experimentation ability over here, because experimentation was considered a self buff. There was a good ISO that you could use with experimentation. I think it restored stamina or something, but I had fun with it because Craven used potions too. Morbius is fun. When he comes back, I'm interested in playing Morbius again. Nightcrawler was an early PvP god due to his bleeds, but unlike Electra, his bleeds were not internal bleeding. However, when the Swashbuckler kit came out, the infiltrator version of Nightcrawler became quite a threat, as he had a really good AoE. He also had good punch-out abilities, along with good bleed spreaders. His strongest right now is Marvel Avengers Alliance, despite the fact that he is in Marvel Future Fight. Psylocke. What can we say about the storied history of Psylocke? She appeared in a Marvel Avengers Alliance movie as under the control of Olivia Munn. People had varying reactions to it. I thought Olivia Munn generally looked the part, but some people were saying, like, her psychic abilities in that movie, like, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. She would eventually get the Uncanny suit, which keeps her infiltrator and then adds a tactician outfit to it. She was extremely important for the X Factor team, as she gave them Stealthy at True Strike, which Phantom X really, really needed, and Angel or Archangel needed also. I loved Psylocke's animations in Marvel Avengers Alliance. I loved the sound of them, the visuals of them. I liked using her. She did 2 rounds of PvP for me, one in the beginning of the game and one towards the end of the game. Both time with Archangel, although the first time I used the Mark of the Brotherhood when I was using her. Her other suit is really good, but you give up an ISO, despite the fact that she is in Marvel Future Fight and is a pretty solid blaster, especially a mind-oriented blaster. She was also very good in Marvel Heroes, another one of the few characters that I actually raised to level 60 and capped them out. I liked Psylocke a lot, but I would really have to say her biggest power position is Marvel Avengers Alliance, even though she is pretty good in Marvel Future Fight. I've been waiting to get to Satana for a long, long time now doing these videos. Satana is in Marvel Future Fight. She was in Marvel Avengers Alliance. She had some controversy in Marvel Future Fight that one of her abilities and the new outfit was very sexual oriented and very succubus-y. She kind of sat on the ground and writhed a little bit. You would think it was from the game Agony. It wasn't really bad because she was fully clothed. Is in fact more clothed than this. And the sexuality, the movements really wasn't that bad, but the company behind Marvel Future Fight went ahead and changed it. So it's a little bit different now. I will have to say she was an absolute beast in Marvel Avengers Alliance if you knew what to do with her. Pesty was her friend. Scroll of Rudemeroth was her friend. Running the demon set of weapons that allowed you to take advantage of the debuffs that she placed on the team in order to get stronger was also very good. Shana was only in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Again, this was a little bit of one that caused controversy in MAA when she arrived as being perhaps a little too sexy. But this is how Shana has always been represented, so I don't understand what the complaint was. She was fun, but she was probably a little tough to build into the really good category. Spider-Man, of course, like, he's in everything. He's in Marvel Future Fight, he's in Marvel Avengers Alliance, he is a leader in Marvel Battle Lines, he's a card in Battle Lines. His Future Foundation suit was a very, very popular PvP suit for some time. And then eventually, Amazing Spider-Man Scrapper version was my favorite. He is fairly meta in Marvel Future Fight because he's often used in PvP timeline battles, because if your comic card cooldowns are good enough, he just basically keeps you webbed the entire time. If, however, you can break the web cycle, you will do damage to him that cannot be recovered, and you will eventually win, even on autoplay. He's good in Marvel Strike Force, but he's somebody you get very commonly, so his rarity value is not that strong. I would have to say, and this may seem a little weird, and you could fight me on it, and I'd understand, I'd have to say he's strongest in Marvel Future Fight, simply because he rules the roost in PvP, and if your cooldown skills are good enough, you're probably just going to want to throw the game out the window when Spider-Man has kept you webbed for 4 minutes. Tough call, though. Spiral was only in Marvel Avengers Alliance. She was absolutely a favorite of mine, especially when you got that ISO later on in the game that allows you to use the dances as a multifunction, which meant she was either a debuff machine or a buff machine, or, so let's see, she could put out pressure points, or she could do weak point, or she could do breakdown, or disoriented, which was big, but nobody really ever used fouette and tournante that much. It was mostly dance magic dance, because this is the hit point reducing debuffs. Sword dance not used that often, except mirror images were cool. I would say 1 and 3, which is Macabre Fandango and Dance Magic Dance, were her absolute best dances that get used almost all the time. Time Spiral was good. She was one of the first people to have a D power, but then the D power got nerfed a little bit. You can see early videos on my channel of me using Spiral with several teams, and I believe one of them was called the Downward Spiral. Thank you, 9 Inch Nails. I was always sad that we didn't get how she was represented in the Marvel vs. Capcom games, of having the blue outfit with the boots that looked very samurai-ish, but, you know, hey, this Spiral was cool. Even though this is an X-Force Spiral, she never got any of the benefits from it. She never had any X-Force team-ups. So, moving back along over here. Try to go as fast as I can. StarLord. StarLord, of course, had the movie outfit. He also had what I like to call the bellhop outfit. He is considered a legendary character in Marvel Strike Force, that you basically have to get like a recurring spec ops for him. He is in Future Fight, but he is only a buffer in Marvel Future Fight. You use him as a lead for energy teams. Clearly Marvel Avengers Alliance is where this guy wins. This outfit, as a blaster, he was part of Triple Blaster Blow-Up, and he was also quite used with Quicksilver, Spitfire, and Rocket Raccoon. Any team up where adding extra attacks was super big, you found Blaster StarLord, complete nightmare, very, very strong, a lot of damage, a lot of setup. He wins in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Tigra, I found, was always underrated. If you liked bleeds like I do, Tigra was a very good character, and she would eventually get some good ISOs like Huntress. And Catastrophic was okay, but really the Predatory Empowered ISO 8 is what made Tigra very, very strong. She was good with Black Knight, and she was good with several other bleed-loving people like X-23. You just had to make sure the bleeds stick. Ultimate Spider-Man, I know people love Miles Morales as a character. I know the Spider-Verse is very good, where he features prominently. I know people like him as Miles. I just hated him in this game. I didn't think he was anywhere. I didn't think he was that good. I didn't think his damage was good. I didn't think his utility was good. The sprite always weirded me out. It looked like some fucked up alien with the 3 fingers. even though I know that's the Spider-Man web pose. It's 3 fingers there. The weird head. He's in Marvel Future Fight. He's in Marvel Strike Force. He's considered fairly solid in Marvel Future Fight, especially with the uniform. And he's okay in Strike Force. I'm going to have to give him and his uniform in Marvel Future Fight the high point of where he's at his best. He was a little annoying as an infiltrator in Marvel Avengers Alliance. I never found him that good. Victor. So Victor is a runaway. He actually would later become a bad guy in the series because his DNA comes from Ultron, and I think 1 or 2 of the runaways have the code to shut him down. That gets him into a loop, and he will shut down if need be. The weird things with his arms, it was a weird sprite for me. It reminded me of the geisha robots from Ghost in the Shell. The ones that their heads split open, you see the robot face, and they would curl their legs around the Japanese guys and make a cage around them. That's always what I thought of with Victor. He's not in any other game, so he wins as a default in Marvel Avengers Alliance. But the one step ahead ISO really made him a formidable defensive infiltrator. I hated going up against Victor groups because he would always res, and there were times where he res 8 times in a battle. Wasp is one of those characters that snuck up on you in Marvel Avengers Alliance. She's in a few games. She is in Future Fight. She is in Strike Force. She is a hard-to-get character in Strike Force. She has a strong showing in Future Fight as a specific thing. Not herself, but she was one of the first counters to Doctor Strange, but she's just a good debuffer on teams, and she also helps as a bonus, even though you don't actively use her. I'd have to say she was at her strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance if you knew how to use her. You had to know how to use her debuffs, and then set her up for really good fist bumps, or set up classic Hank Pym for a good boot. She was really just a setup for Hank, but she still was annoying. And finally, Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier was another one of those infiltrators that, just because he was an infiltrator and because I was so heavily tactician based, he was really, really obnoxious. He was good for group bosses because of the mines, and then Fixer blows up the mines, which includes Winter Soldier's mines, which means mines do more damage, blah blah blah, lots of stuff. Magnetized blast mine. He was annoying. First of all, he could have used an ISO. The fact that he never got an ISO really sucked. But he was a bit, of an annoying infiltrator to run up against in PvP, because he liked to do retaliation and he liked to do revolution. Those extra attacks from Winter Soldier really did add up, and if he would have used the PKB method, he only had 2 clicks to max out his attack, and his accuracy, also crit, was very high. So the moment, if you did the PKB method, you did attack, and then you did accuracy and evasion, you could get him to be a pretty strong and evasive character with a little bit of work. I just didn't like infiltrators in PvP, because I was so tactician based, and Winter Soldier was definitely one of the infiltrators that I hated. He is in Marvel Future Fight, and he's okay. No, excuse me. He's in Marvel Strike Force, and he's okay, but he is a meta character right now for speed in Marvel Future Fight. Knowing that's the case, I have to give his strongest showing right now to Marvel Future Fight, because he's king of male speed right now, and he has been for some time. He took it over from Quicksilver, so I'm going to give his strongest showing to Marvel Future Fight. And that wraps up the infiltrators, folks. We're not going to be able to do the generals today. We'll have to do it in another video. It'll be short, but to quickly go over it, I gotta say, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Future Fight, Marvel Strike Force, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Avengers Alliance, although Marvel Avengers Alliance 2 might be decent. Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Marvel Avengers Alliance. This one was MAA heavy, but there were some others. Winter Soldier is Future Fight, Strike Force. You don't see Wasp too much. Electra probably is me. I think I declare, yeah, Marvel Avengers Alliance is where Electra belongs, but she's good for newbies in Strike Force. But this was really a fun one, as there were several infiltrators I was looking forward to talking about, like Tigra and Satana and Psylocke and Morbius. And then there were some infiltrators that I absolutely hate, wish I could burn off the planet, and that would be like Falcon and Victor. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and stay tuned to the channel for future updates on other games that we're looking at, and of course we'll be doing a generalist video. Take care, everybody.